Most people paying $20 a month for ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini have never seriously tried the one AI tool that is free, has over 100 million users, and on several benchmark tests outperforms the tools they are paying for. That tool is DeepSeek, and the reason most coverage of it falls short is that the honest answer about whether you should use it is genuinely complicated. It is not as simple as great tool, use it, or Chinese spyware. Avoid it. Both of those takes are wrong, so let me give you the version that is actually useful. DeepSeek is built by a Chinese company called Hangzhou DeepSeek Artificial Intelligence. It launched its R1 model in January 2025 and caused genuine chaos in the US tech industry. The claim was that they had trained a model matching the performance of OpenAI's best tools using roughly 2,000 GPUs, compared to the 16,000 GPUs that went into comparable US models. Whether those exact numbers are fully accurate is debated, but the model's capability is not. Within weeks of launch, DeepSeek had 30 million users. By mid-2025, it was approaching 100 million monthly users worldwide, making it one of the fastest-growing AI applications in history. That kind of adoption does not happen by accident. People tried it and found it useful. That is the starting point for any honest evaluation. The current flagship model is DeepSeek V4. That is what we are talking about in this video. Here is what it actually does. On raw capability, DeepSeek V4 is genuinely impressive, and I want to be clear about that before we get into the caveats. On human eval, a coding benchmark measuring whether an AI can correctly solve real programming problems, DeepSeek scores around 91%. That puts it in the same tier as Claude Opus and GPT-5. On mathematical reasoning and analytical tasks, it performs strongly across multiple independent tests. For everyday writing, summarizing documents, answering questions, and brainstorming, it produces output that would have been considered impressive from a paid tool a year ago. For the average person using AI to draft emails, understand complex topics, get help with code, or think through problems, DeepSeek Free competes directly with the $20 tools. That is a real statement, and it is backed by the actual output. Where it starts to fall apart is consistency and reliability. DeepSeek has a higher hallucination rate than Claude and ChatGPT. It will occasionally present false information with the same confident tone it uses for correct information, which is a worse failure mode than being uncertain. Independent research found it fails more than half of jailbreak tests, meaning its safety guardrails are weaker. And there is a specific pattern worth knowing about. It censors topics that are politically sensitive in China. Ask it about Tiananmen Square, Taiwan's political status, or Xinjiang, and you will either get a refusal or a response that reflects the Chinese government's position rather than the factual record. For most everyday tasks, that does not come up. But it is a real limitation, and it tells you something about the model's training. The other thing worth mentioning is that DeepSeek filters content through a political lens in ways that are sometimes subtle. On questions about geopolitics, international relations, or anything touching Chinese government policy, the model's outputs require more skepticism than you would need with Claude or ChatGPT. That is not speculation, it is documented behavior from researchers who have tested it systematically. Now here is the part that most DeepSeek coverage handles badly: the privacy situation, not because the concerns are exaggerated, they are not, but because most coverage presents it as either completely fine or completely dangerous, and neither of those is accurate. DeepSeek's own privacy policy states that user data is stored on servers in China. Under Chinese law, the government can legally demand access to that data at any time without the kind of legal process required in EU or US jurisdictions. That is a structural fact about operating under Chinese law, not a conspiracy theory. The Chinese government has used these powers with other companies before. The question is not whether they can access DeepSeek data. They can. The question is whether they would be interested in yours. What DeepSeek collects is also worth understanding. It gathers your conversation history, your device identifiers, your IP address, and this is the specific one that raised flags with security researchers, your keystroke patterns. The rhythm and cadence of how you type can function as a biometric identifier that distinguishes you from other users even without an account. Cybersecurity researchers found the iOS app was transmitting some of this data without proper encryption, in plain text over the open internet, where it could be intercepted. In January 2025, Shortly after launch, DeepSeek suffered a database breach that exposed over 1 million records, including conversation histories and back-end infrastructure details. When European data protection authorities asked questions, DeepSeek's response was essentially that EU law did not apply to them. Italy banned the app. Australia, Taiwan, South Korea, and multiple US federal agencies, including the Pentagon and NASA, followed with bans on government devices. I want to be fair here. ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini also collect your conversation data. The difference is not that Western companies are angels. They are not. The difference is jurisdiction and legal recourse. Your data with those companies sits under US or EU frameworks with some degree of enforcement. With DeepSeek, it sits under Chinese law with limited recourse if something goes wrong and no transparency about who has access or why. So who should actually use DeepSeek? Let me be direct about this, because the nuanced answer is actually useful. If you are using it for general non-sensitive tasks on a personal device, learning something new, working through a coding problem that does not involve proprietary code, drafting content that has nothing personal in it, exploring ideas, the practical risk is lower and the capability is real. For that use case, DeepSeek Free is a legitimate option that saves you $20 a month and delivers comparable output on most everyday tasks. If you are putting anything sensitive into it, work documents, client information, personal financial details, medical questions, proprietary code from your employer, anything you would not post publicly, do not use DeepSeek. The jurisdiction issue alone should stop you. Use Claude or ChatGPT where the data governance is clearer, the legal frameworks are stronger, and the companies have actual accountability mechanisms. If you are a developer who wants the open source model running locally with no data leaving your device at all, that is actually the cleanest way to use DeepSeek. Local deployment removes the privacy concern entirely because nothing is being sent anywhere. It requires technical setup, but for developers who understand that trade-off, it is a genuinely good option. And if you are in Belgium or anywhere in the EU, the GDPR situation is relevant here. DeepSeek has refused to engage with EU data protection authorities and has been banned by regulators in several European countries. Using it for anything involving personal data arguably puts you in a legal gray area that most people are not thinking about. Here is the honest summary. DeepSeek is a capable AI tool. The free access is real. The privacy concerns are real. And the answer for most people is not DeepSeek versus a paid tool as a binary choice. Use DeepSeek for low-stakes personal tasks where you are not sharing anything sensitive. Keep Claude or ChatGPT for work, for anything involving other people's data, for anything where you need to trust the output without spending significant time verifying it. The $20 you spend on one good paid plan covers the cases where reliability and data security actually matter. DeepSeek covers the rest for free. If you want the breakdown of which paid tool, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, is the right one for your specific workflow, that is the video before this one. It is linked right here, and it covers exactly that decision with the same level of honesty. And if you want to keep getting AI coverage like this, the real picture, not the hype, not the panic, subscribe. New video drops whenever something worth covering actually happens.